Hello again, welcome back to the Reg, and today we're asking whether IT and telephony can work together, and to help us resolve this question we have enlisted the help of the fire brigade. It's not as daft as it seems. Stick with us and you'll find out why, because we have West Yorkshire Fire Service in the house today. It's quite exciting. OK, now, my name's Tim Phillips, as you know, and before we get going, just a quickie to remind you how you interact with us, because we are interactive here. We are social at the Register. The most important part of that is to use the tab to ask questions, especially because we've got a Reg reader here today presenting. So it's kind of like one of you in here, and it's terrific. But he knows everything that there is to know about this subject because he's lived it. So if you want to resolve any of your problems, then ask our guest. Or you can ask the other guys as well. They might not know. Also, you can download the slides. There's not much to see today. The slides are just pictures. We've got people talking rather than people talking to laptops. Also, let us know how we did afterwards to see if you like this format. If you don't, we won't do it again. And if you do, then we'll do more of them. So, first of all, let's get on to introducing our guests. From Microsoft today, at the far end of the table, Steve Tassel. Hello, Steve. Welcome back to the studio.
Morning, Tim.
Last time we were in the studio, we were giving out Christmas gifts and everything. I'm afraid we haven't got anything for you today.
That's a shame.
That's it. Now, I was looking at we put up a piece to say that this is going to come, sign up for this, come along to it. And I was looking at the comments from that, Steve. One of the comments was that about putting in telephony applications into IT, saying bonuses are given to those that designed and built techno whiz-bangs that take longer to do the job and are not usually reliable for longer than, say, 15 minutes. Is this fair?
I think traditionally that's very true, but certainly with a software approach, then systems are much more easy to implement than they have been traditionally. So certainly, if you've got those sorts of comments, we'd love to talk to those sorts of people because we think we can help them. So.
Yeah, they might not want to talk to you, but let's give it an hour and let's see how they feel like it. Because otherwise it could get a bit tasty. Now, our special guest today, we're very pleased to have him in the studio. Give a big round of applause in your office. It'll seem a bit strange to the people around you. From West Yorkshire Fire Service, Darren Stone. Darren, welcome to our studio.
Okay.
You're not regretting coming here, are you?
I'll tell you in 55 minutes.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Now, a little bit about West Yorkshire Fire Service, first of all. If we can we've got a map here, haven't we, so we can see. So for anyone who's wondering where West Yorkshire is, it's in the middle there. It's that yellow bit. Back, stick on the map. And what sort of size is West Yorkshire? What sort of size is the fire service here?
Well, we cover a population density of 2 million people. In terms of number of people, we've got roughly 2,000. We've got about 1,100 firefighters, the traditional firefighters. We've got about 145 part-time. And then we've got support and specialist staff, which include IT, finance, HR, etc.
A lot of locations?
49, based throughout West Yorkshire, ranging from major population densities like Leeds and Bradford, right through to rural moorland areas habited by 4 people and a sheep.
Right. I looked up West Yorkshire on the internet, actually, to find out what was there. I found out that the coat of arms of West Yorkshire County Council, its motto was, by effort, achieve. So it obviously didn't put in the effort because they disbanded it in 1986. In West Yorkshire are such things as Ilkley Moor. That's in West Yorkshire, isn't it? Yeah. Middleton Priory, where you'll find the world's oldest steam railway, which last time I went to West Yorkshire, I actually took that one from London. And the National Media Museum, where they have an entire gallery dedicated to the Register, if you want to go and visit there. So, and also on Wikipedia, it said, West Yorkshire tends to be cooler than counties further south.
I think that's temperature-wise.
Yeah. OK, so let's have a look at some of the things, because it's not just fighting fires that you do, is it? So we've got a couple of pictures here of some of the things that you do. So here, are you lifting the cow out of the ditch, or are you putting it in?
No, to be honest, it's not me, but it's not one of the IT jobs. No, we do humanitarian things, so we do rescue cows out of ditches. We don't do cats out of trees anymore.
Who does that these days?
The RSPCA and I think Rolf Harris as well, as part of the animal rescue. So we do a vast range of things. So traditionally, we've squirted water, and that's been the fireman Sam sort of attitude to the fire service. But we now do prevention and enforcement. So effectively, fire certificates or visiting schools and other office accommodation to assist people on becoming more fire aware.
And you have a look at the next picture. This is your traditional job. This is actually your server room after you installed SharePoint, isn't it? Yeah.
Trying to cool it down.
Yeah.
And the one hot day we had.
But that's we assume that's what just what the fire service does. But now your jobs are a lot more. They create a lot more paperwork apart from anything else, don't they?
Yeah, traditionally, I guess one of the things is as part of the government initiative for us to be more accountable. We now have more statistical analysis, and also the government, based on funding, need us to fill forms justifying our existence. So the firefighters spend, unfortunately, an inordinate amount of time filling in admin paperwork, and that's obviously one of the reasons that we've now moved to a more flexible working arrangement, which we'll discuss later.
And our last picture, because that's actually Steve Tassel, isn't it? That's when he came up to see you after you installed.
Correct.
Oh, yes, it's not really him at all, is it? I'm only joking. Anyway, no, but so the serious point behind this is you've got a job that's much more complicated, involves much more form filling and much more communication, scheduling, these sort of things than you ever had before, and more than people realise.
Yeah, and we're also trying to do it with much less people. And I think that's been the biggest challenge, that the government's imposed various strategies on us with regards to saving budget, so it's smarter working, and also environmental concerns. People, we have to make 20% cut in our environmental or carbon footprint. And the other problem we have is obviously diminishing budgets. So, and given that 96% of our costs are our people, unfortunately, to make that 20%, we may have to lose people. And obviously, we've still got the same job to do with less people, so it's more flexible, it's more aggressive sort of working strategies.
So more efficiency is not a nice to have in this situation?
It's an essential.
Yeah.
We can't, we've got to protect the frontline services. And obviously, to do that, we have to cut back-end or back-office systems, and given that they're only 8 or 9%, 20% or 8% is difficult to achieve.
Yeah, I understand. So we've got three sections today, and the first one will be looking at what the business problem is in a little bit more detail and how you integrate your applications there. The second one we'll be looking at how you plan your integration for IT and communications, what you need to do to get that in place, get the project off the ground for a start, and the sort of decisions that you have to make. And the third one, we're going to look at the users and how it affects them. And there are some good stories from that, actually, that we've got from Darren. And that's great. Remember, ask any questions you want. If your question is, there's smoke coming out of my kitchen, what should I do about it? We're probably not the best people to deal with at the moment because Darren's kind of busy, but by all means, please go ahead and do something about that. OK, so first of all, when we're looking at the problem, Darren, where did you get to? I mean, it's a question... Dale, have I introduced you?
I don't think you have to.
Well,
I thought I'd been forgotten.
Let's rewind. My God, I'm really sorry. With us today is.
Shall I?
I'll tell you why it is. It's because you're printed on your script as Dave Vile. So I'm thinking, who's he? I've never heard of him. I'm really sorry about that, Dale. I suddenly looked round and you were there. Also with us today, our old mate from Freeform Dynamics. On the on-demand, we'll shove this up the front, so it looks like I know what I'm doing. Our old mate from Freeform Dynamics, Dale Vile. Dale, welcome.
Thank you very much, Steve.
That's great. Thank you for that. Quick question. Dale, someone said about this, am I missing something here? If it can't wait, then you phone. If you can, you email. That's about as simple as it can be, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I suppose that kind of sums it up. So should we sort of wrap it up here? Seriously?
Now you're punishing me.
I think, if you go back a few years, probably people said if you want to get from A to B and you're in a hurry, get on your horse. If you've got a bit more time, then walk. But
don't work like
time moves on, doesn't it? I think we've got a few more options today, and that's...
Right, well, let's have a look at the few more options. I'm sorry, I'll get back to you now, Darren. What was the problem then? What have we got to? Why was the problem that IT and comms, they're not integrated? How did that affect the way you work?
Well, I think traditionally, we'd as has been rightly said, if it's urgent, you telephone. I think the problem we have is obviously being a 24-hour service is who would you phone? The back-end office staff only work 6. The firefighters work 24 hours a day. And given their reliance on IT and also support functions, they need to be able to contact the right person at the right time. And we spent, and I guess we've all been there, inordinate periods of time, either emailing people not to get a response, or hoping that you get a response at some point, or doing the telephone stroke voicemail tag, where I leave you a message that appears a post-it note on your screen, you ring me back, I don't ring you back, etc., etc. So one of the challenges we've had is trying to resolve that issue, and then also moving forward with regards to making the smarter working attitude. We've historically deemed work to be a location. So work's always been a location. What we're now getting around to the mentality of that work is an activity. So it's not, it shouldn't be geographically based, and I need to be contactable or aware that people are trying to contact me wherever I may be. So if I'm sat at my office, I'm physically at work, but am I physically working? And I think that's one of the challenges we've had before, trying to move people around the county to form the back office systems, but also make them contactable. And the other issue that we were trying to stifle was issues like Twitter. Obviously, Twitter's 5 years old today, I understand. So, so happy birthday,
or just
Twitter.
over 5 years old,
Yeah.
if you're watching this on the on-demand.
Yeah.
But 5 years old, 5 years old today, and during that, honestly, have you got fun tweeting each other?
We
Well,
well,
not tweet
here-
each other, but tweeting.
Tweeting. But there's also that social media side of it. So people will, if you don't give them the technology, they will circumvent the systems to try and achieve what they need to do. So they will instant message each other. They've tried using Skype, etc. And that's a great technology, but we want to manage it in a corporate way. And I'm not going to be big brother about this, but if people are sending instant messages outside the organisation only to come back into the organisation, one, it's information that we're not able to search back through, but also if they're using third-party services, what's the security of those services, what's the availability of those services. So what we've been trying to do is create a robust, reliable, manageable, governance-ready sort of solution.
Steve, now on this topic, is it that there just hasn't been sufficiently mature software available? Is it that it doesn't work together? Or is it that people just don't know how to use it? Which one?
I think traditionally, actually, the costs have been too prohibitive to do this, and there hasn't traditionally been the same cost pressures put upon us. I don't know any IT outfit, as we hear from Darren, that hasn't got less budget than they had last year. So suddenly the pressures to do more with less are there in a way that haven't been previously. And faced with either laying off people or making your IT more effective, then people obviously picking the latter first of all. So that's kind of creating a compelling event to look at this in earnest. Software is now enabling that as a more straightforward, more low-cost option.
But the pressure on you, if you're going to provide software that's going to replace traditional telephony, is that you have to have that available 99.999% of the time, especially when it's in a fire service.
Absolutely, yeah. It just needs to work just the same as any copper wire phone has done in the past.
Are you confident of that?
Absolutely. We wouldn't be sitting here
No.
otherwise.
But it is a serious question,
Yes.
though. On reliability and availability,
Yeah.
do you think you're up there?
Yeah, I mean, certainly with the Link, we've invested a lot in resiliency and making sure that, in any kind of scenario where certain software can misbehave, that there's kind of the measures in place to ensure that the service keeps running 24/7. Absolutely.
Dale, is he right? Is he, is the reliability and the availability of this sort of software okay?
I think the evidence is yes. I mean, we've had a lot of feedback from Reg readers that have successfully gone down this route, which is pretty encouraging. We've also had a lot of feedback from Reg readers who've had problems trying to get all this stuff to work. But that's not normally because of the solutions themselves. That's normally down to the way the solutions have been implemented. I think we're going to come on to that a little bit later. But the other thing, just to sort of build on some of the rationale behind this stuff, Darren was mentioning the fact that people are starting to use things unofficially, Twitter and social media and various other things. I think the problem that a lot of organisations are trying to deal with is the fact that different communication mechanisms have kind of crept up on them over time, and that's led to a lot of stuff that people are using that hasn't necessarily been designed to work together. And so when you look at the problems people have with communications, quite often it's not because there's a lack of capability. It's
just
because
not
it just
knitting
doesn't work
together.
Yeah. So I think that's the main thing that I would call out. I think the other thing is people don't always realise that that's happened, because it has happened gradually over the course of a decade or so in many organisations. And it's only when you're under cost pressure or some bit of the business isn't particularly working that well that suddenly you realise, when you look at what's the cause of this, that actually it isn't very good, is it, the way we're doing things right now?
Does this ring true to you, Darren? And was there a particular event that made you think, oh, this is a bit out of control, or, oh, we need to do this better?
I think part of the challenge is that we're introducing new initiatives which cause us to I want to start at greenfield, and I think we've historically, when we came to looking at the budgets, where we spent the money, what we spent the money on, we had the traditional PABX system, and we had the traditional, which was supported by a full comms team who did the radios and the moved a telephone, etc. And then we had the IT side, and the two never really met, and we'd got suppliers who were trying to sell us their system, Bristol, we'd have two disparate sort of solutions. When we came to implement these new ways of working, at that point we said, well, there must be a better way. And also we looked at our licensing estate of what we were paying for various licenses for different systems, and also just weird things like training. As you've got 19 different systems you're trying to glue together, System X brings out a new version, you have to send people on training. That then doesn't interface with System Y, because that's going to be updated in 4 months. So you're now left with IT trying to find, I don't know, bits of glue and string that hold it all together, only to find in 3 months' time that System M gets changed, and that then knocks it all apart again. So we decided that potentially the best way forward is to stick with one supplier or solution, and hopefully at that point the left hand and the right hand know what they're doing, and we can have a strategy then for moving forward.
How grand do you think it is appropriate for people to have a plan on this? Do you think that it's right to do the whole thing all at once?
It depends. I mean, back to the thing you said about the 24-hour service and the 999, we don't currently use this for our 999 call handling things. I think that's
That's a big step.
It's a step forward, and given that I live in West Yorkshire, I want to protect my house and my sort of livelihood, etc. But for everything else, we think it's a cost-effective and worthwhile thing. I think one of the challenges you have is obviously things like support contracts, and I think that's one of the biggest, if de-incentivised is a good reason, that we've signed 3-year agreements on our existing PABXs, and therefore they've still got 18 months to run.
Right, it's never the right time to change.
It's never the right time, but if you wait till the right time, you've missed that opportunity. And I think we're now saying, and we've got through our management board, that we should be looking at Invest to Save. So Invest to Save is now the big thing in local government. You need to spend a tiny bit of money now and realise benefits in the long run, where historically we've just lived for today and tomorrow we'll live again. So if you put a solution in, it would have cost you £50 and lasted to the end of the financial year, you'd have done that rather than spend £55, and it would have lasted the next 5 years. And I think we're now at the point of saying the genie's out of the bottle in terms of social media and communications, and people want to communicate in new ways, and we as an organisation want to manage that process. And I think, as you've rightly said, that if you let people do what they want, some people will do it the corporate way and some people do it their way. And once people start doing it their way, you've then lost them and you've lost that opportunity.
And you're not capturing the information.
And we're not capturing the information, which then potentially can be used somewhere else.
So, Dale, just quickly on this, one thing that Darren's alluded to here is you've got a bunch of stuff here, you've got a bunch of stuff there. Sometimes to integrate, you're going to have to throw some of it away, and you're just going to have to give up on that investment. Do you think there is an effective model which can justify that in all cases?
Not in all cases. It depends on your starting point, obviously. But the way to think about it is that there are some direct benefits of consolidating and rationalising, as Darren alluded to. I mean, whether it be support and maintenance agreements or just the ongoing cost of running these things when you've got duplicate functionality, duplicate systems, a lot of crossover and integration points. But also there's the kind of incremental value of getting things working together more seamlessly. We've got some pretty hard evidence from Reader studies that if you just corporatise individual elements of your communications framework, so taking some of that unofficial stuff and making it resilient and secure, etc., etc. That gets you so far. But actually, it's not an additive effect. It's more of a multiplier effect. So the more you can actually bring under the same umbrella into a more coherent communication mechanism, you start to get a sort of 1 + 1 + 1 = 5 kind of phenomenon that occurs. So you get web conferencing and instant messaging and presence and telephony, conferencing and other things working together. The actual overall value is higher than if you implement those individual bits separately.
Steve, are you after the whole thing, the whole pie for this, or are you a good citizen who's working hard to integrate with all these legacy applications and other vendors?
I think to answer that, I mean, Darren's situation is, in their approach, the compelling event has been to save money. So, to a certain degree, there was an immediate cost saving by removing some of the license costs for other systems that they had already. But it will very much depend, on the customer's circumstances. Some customers will say, well, actually, we want to sweat the telephony infrastructure for another 18 months and let that run and run Microsoft infrastructure alongside. So
when they say that, you slap your forehead and think, oh, that's never going to work. We're going to spend those full 18 months sitting there trying to integrate it.
We have customers that do both. So, we never go into a customer and say, you have to rip out everything that you've got because it doesn't make any sense and it won't work with Link. We look at what they've got and say, well, you can integrate it and this will be how it will work. Obviously, whilst you've got multiple systems that pretty much do the same thing working alongside each other, you're not getting the full cost benefit from that. But, we can do both. It just depends on what the customer wants.
I think there's a really important point I'd like to underline just from some of the stuff that Darren's been saying around the efficiency side of things, because I think, if you talk about unified communications and some of this advanced communication stuff, it's very easy to gravitate towards making the life of the average middle manager a little bit easier. And, you hear lots of sort of day-in-the-life stories about you check less email. Actually, you can have that kind of conversation if you want. But when it comes down to it, the impact of coherent communications on efficiency can be huge. And here we're talking about some pretty hardcore objectives. So it's not all kind of fluffy, soft, let's make people's lives easier, let's grease the wheels of communication and allow innovation to take place and all the other things that we hear from some people. All that's good stuff. A lot of it comes down to hardcore.
Well, let's have a look. Let's have a look at the hardcore. I'm not sure I phrased that correctly, but Darren, let's have a look and see exactly what you did on this. When did you get started on this project?
I would guess we started about 2 years ago, but not on the telephony. I mean, the telephony came as part of an exercise. We historically have been conservative with small c in terms of our adoption of technology, because obviously we'd always support the frontline services, which are firefighters putting fires out, and the admin function's never been a massive role to that. But obviously, as we've moved further on in time and we have to be accountable for spending public money, we've had more and more emphasis from central government on providing statistical analysis and things. And also, so we implemented SharePoint at that point, 2007, migrated into 2010, and found fantastic benefits in terms of finding documents, document scanning, and all that. We then added, or migrated, should I say, from a group-wide system into an exchange system environment.
That must have been quite some...
A bit of a learning curve. Again, I think it was possibly led by some of our users, because, again, most people in this world, rightly or wrongly, have had some sort of experience of Microsoft technologies, and they came to the fire service and we were using, partly because of our issues, technology which was 7-8 years old. So for them, they were moving back in time. We're unable to do certain things. It wasn't a 21st century sort of technology. So we moved to Exchange, and that gave us another tick in the box, as just been rightly said. We then implemented Microsoft Link, again only for presence information. And that then lit up another sort of area. So
who was demanding that presence then? Because people don't, generally speaking, that's something that vendors talk about, but ordinary people don't say, oh, what I need is a presence function.
Part of it came about as part of IT training. Well, not say IT training, because again, one of the things as a 21st century workforce is equality and diversity, legislation training. Our firefighters have to just not squirt water. They need to know about ethnicity, diversity, legislation, etc. If you want promotion, you've got to do a study, etc. And historically, we've done that by bringing people into a classroom, explaining that technology or that system to them, and then sending them away with a workbook. Obviously, that's not cost effective. It's not necessarily best use of their time because you take people off.
And some of them are travelling quite a long way.
Quite a long way. Yeah. It ends up being a 1 hour training session, becomes a full day because of transfer, travelling, lunches, etc. So what we then started doing is e-learning. So we adopted an e-learning strategy where we put most of this information online. The challenge with that is a firefighter works 24 hours a day. Can work 24 hours a day, 365, Saturdays, Sundays, etc. And who do they contact if they need some assistance on training? So by having these mentors, so we trained up certain individuals who were matter study experts on certain areas, so it may be equalities or legislation about fire doors, as an example. They, through presence, can be contactable. So if I'm a firefighter, I'm sat at Wetherby Fire Station, I'm just doing me training, and I get stuck in a particular area, do I have to wait till Monday morning to contact somebody? Oh no, I can see that Pete's available, he's online, therefore I can quickly send in an IM message, which ultimately could become a phone call, etc. But I found the right person at the right time, and then we've not missed that opportunity.
Right, so the shift work pattern creates a need for presence information
to do that. But also things like in meetings, we've found on some of our senior officers, we've not fully got away from that, but taking laptops into meetings. People in business will say, well, we've done that for years and years and years. We're still faxes were relatively new to us in terms of communication 10 years ago. It wasn't our core business technology. We're now taking senior officers, taking their laptops in a meeting. And if you get questioned by a counsellor, historically, you'd have said, we need to take this offline, I'll get back to you next week. Obviously, if you've got your laptop in front of you, you can find the individual who created that report that's causing this issue. You can then instant message them and say, Darren's available, quick message. When you put in this figure, 5 million, where did that figure come from? I can provide that information if I've got it to hand, or I've got the raft of information available in SharePoint, and we can answer that question there and then. So decision-making process is now accelerated. So it's not ask a question, wait 3 weeks, ask another question. It's almost ask a question, we'll get an answer before the end of the meeting, and then we can make an informed decision on it.
Dale, how do companies manage to, when you're making a business case for this, is it possible to capture this on a spreadsheet to see that there's time saved? Because a lot of people think that this actually just generates more work as well.
I think usually there's 3 elements to a business case that we've seen. One of them is the direct cost savings that we talked around earlier on through just the process of rationalisation. So that's just running the numbers. The difficulty there is always understanding how much you're spending at the moment doing stuff. But once you've actually got a handle on that, you can fairly easily figure out how much you can save. There's then, so that's a kind of systems view of the world, if you like. There's then very much a process view of the world. I think a lot of people talk about this area as if it's kind of part of a fairly ill-defined collaboration type concept, whereas actually when you look at what goes through the average user's email and you look at the kind of phone calls that they're making and receiving during the course of a day, a lot of it is actually embedded in business processes. They're actually conducting processes. If you can understand that, then you can look at the overhead that inefficient communications that are probably in place at the moment places on that business process, whether it be in terms of wasted time, resource consumed, or whether it be just the time it takes, latency, delays, breaks in processes, whatever. You can now look at, if you were to introduce presence and the stuff that goes with it, how much can you compress the amount of time spent in business process? So in that sense, with a little bit of work, quite often you can get to a business view of how you can kind of grease the wheels of the way the business works. I think there's a bunch of stuff which is very difficult to pin down, but it's like the impact on decision making, particularly for more sort of professional senior people. If you can get a hold of people very quickly, you can make a decision much more quickly and in an informed manner. That has an impact, but it's difficult. That's more difficult to measure.
More difficult to capture. Darren, did you have targets on this to say we need to get this process down from 3 days to 3 hours or anything like that? Were you that specific, or were you just seeking to change what everyone saw was waste?
We didn't have specific targets. We had an objective, which is obviously to make the organisation leaner and mean. Well, sorry, the management had an objective to make
I
the target.
don't want to deal with a mean fire service.
leaner and meaner. But in terms of number of individuals, and I think we then realised we had issues or opportunities that we'd have a series of tasks to do, and we could either do it in the same time with the same number of people, which was a non-starter because we needed less people. So we could either do the same amount of work over a longer period, or if we made the people more effective, we could do the same amount of work with less people. So one of the things that we're working towards is that of, can we reduce work numbers by 20% and increase or keep the same amount of work being done? But we didn't set about and say, well, we're going to say X, Y and Z. I mean, one of the things you said about, which were difficult for us, is that how much do you spend on journeys? Because, again, one of the initiatives which has been a bit of a throwaway thing that we said in reports, but is the environmental aspect of it. You know, we have 49 locations, and we were bringing people in, we still do to some extent, into our headquarters office to attend a 1-hour meeting, of which there's only 15 minutes relevant to that individual. So you'd have somebody will turn up from Wetherby, drives, takes 45 minutes into the office, attend a meeting for 1 hour, and then spends 45 minutes away. So he spent 3 hours, effectively, an hour after 3 hours in a car for 10 minutes. So that's not cost effective. So it's the opportunity cost that common sense says there are savings there to be made, but we don't have a single line figure because we're not making widgets. You know, if we're making widgets and saying by implementing this we can make 20 more widgets, or if we were an insurance company, by making our call operators 20% more effective, we'll make £1 million. We can't do that. We're at the intangible end of it, and it's obviously going to work. And I think what we're doing now, the jury's out at the moment. We've got the costings for last year, and we'll be getting the costings for the last 3 months of this year, and we'll see, has car mileage gone down, has the number of visits been improved.
But you are actually going to track that? Yeah.
We're going to track it. If it fails, we'll ignore it.
If you are in the widget manufacturing business, we'd actually like to know how you've got on with this, if you've tried it, or only, in fact, if you haven't tried it, there's something that's stopping you. Then I'd like to know, from your point of view, Steve, when you're dealing with customers, and you hear about customers that are looking at these projects, how closely do they itemise their business case before they get into it?
I think Darren's case is fairly typical, actually, that people first of all look at the hard cost savings, the pounds and pence that can be saved from these projects, and that's really how these things get justified in the first place. You then look at the softer benefits as well, if we can prove that, great, but that's not really what's driving this project. One thing that you will notice is things like, because I'm not having to travel during rush hour now to that meeting, I can do it online. You're managing down the stress levels of your people. You're being asked to do more with less. Your people are having to take on
hard to
bigger
capture, though,
areas.
that, isn't it?
Well, it isn't, actually, because you can look at sick levels of people spending more time at home because they're not fit for purpose. They're leaving the company. Those are obvious ways to track if people are generally feeling good and morale's good in the company. So we can look at that.
Mm-hmm. There's just a quick question in here from Paulie, actually, who was looking at he wants to know a little bit about costs. And is there much you can tell us about costs? He's actually thinking about moving from basic video telephony to the cloud as well, which is one step beyond. I might give that one to you in a minute, Steve.
Sure.
But first of all, Darren, can you tell us a little bit about the cost of introducing this for your point of view?
I think we may not be typical, because again we had the issue of we had multiple vendors, and I think I say we could be typical of everybody, but we had multiple vendors, and
so you had your Novell.
We had a Novell license enterprise agreement, we had a Microsoft enterprise agreement, right. And when we sat down side by side and said, well, what's in our Novell agreement? We've got email, we've got presence information, etc. And then we looked at our Microsoft agreement and said we've got email and presence. We then not tossed a coin, but we then looked at it and said, well, what would be best investing in terms of training resource or even locality of knowledge? Because, again, that's been another problem with us, is finding people who understand the technology, which I think...
How did you do that?
To be honest, by moving... And Microsoft's not going to slip me a tenner for saying this, but we looked at what was available, and I think the more niche a product you get, the more you're beholden to the organisation providing it. And I think we found that with our telecom provider, we provide our PABXs, that they offered some system which had only been trialled in Japan that did video conferencing and did presence, etc. But there was one person in the whole of Europe who understood it. Whereas if we now, rightly or wrongly, look at the Micros technology, there's rafts of information online, there's hundreds of partners who can provide it, there are training courses in our region. I mean, on the last Novell training course that we send someone on for 3 days, they had to come to Bracknell, which is 2 overnight stays. It wasn't easy for us to sort of...
It's 2 overnight stays in Bracknell as well, which is quite a disincentive. Sorry, residents of Bracknell, people who work in Bracknell, you'll understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. So in terms of doing that, but in terms of the actual cost, we saved £62,000 by binning that licence and then implementing the technology. The problem is, to implement technology, you need to spend money, and we're back to this investor-save sort of attitude, but we effectively will be saving 50% of that money. So in the first year, we spent about £32,000 on implementing the technologies, back-end servers, services, etc. But in years 2, 3, 4, etc., it's just the typical running costs. So we've saved not an insignificant amount by doing that.
Steve, I'm going to go to you on the question I left you with earlier. So we've got sort of a video telephony in the cloud. Also want a little bit of information from you about, do you promise people that they're going to save money, or is this just a way to make things work better?
I think, to be brutally honest, the only reason anyone should look at implementing a new telephony platform is to save money. There's no other purpose, particularly right now. That's what people are trying to do. So we don't guarantee at what level they will save. It will largely depend on how much they implement a new platform versus kind of integrating with what's there already, but they will certainly save some money for sure. The point around video conferencing in the cloud, I mean, it's something that we're kind of embarking on with business productivity online, and now moving to Office 365 that's coming out later in the year. And certainly a lot of customers are looking at cloud solutions just because, again, they're not in the business of IT. They have some other core service they're providing, and frankly, if someone else can manage that and have an SLA around it and just pay a subscription for that infrastructure, well then, you can easily swap it out at some point in the future if something else better comes along. So people like that model.
Quick one to wrap this up. Briefly, Darren, have you lost people from IT because you've brought 2 departments together, basically, and this seems to have worked well? Does that mean fewer people?
Fortunately, no, I guess, for IT, because I think the organisations realise that in our circumstance that IT is a facilitator. We won't make any savings. IT will not make any savings, but will enable the business to make savings. I'm not saying that in years 2, 3, 4, as part of these budget cuts, we'll lose people. I think one of the challenges we had is actually 2 disparate groups. So effectively, the communication side are great with soldering irons and cable tackers and various other things, and IT are great at typing. And I think the challenge has been merging those sort of 2 technologies. The Luddites of, well, if it's got a bit of wire, I can understand it, whereas why are you doing that through a web browser?
Do you say this to them directly? Do you go to their faces?
Often when we cast pack somewhere else.
This is Yorkshire, I suppose.
Yeah. No, they're a good team.
Okay, now, but let's have a look. We touched on people, and so for the last bit of this, I want to talk about how we convince, the user experience, because if you take stuff away from them, they're going to hate it. If it seems that it's working less well than before, it's more difficult, they're just not going to do it. They're going to rebel, aren't they? So that's Darren. So when you started to put all this together and you told people this is a new way of working, was there a big change for them? Did you tell them how to do things in different ways?
I guess 2 things. One, we presented to management board. So we did a presentation at management board and explained that. And I think a lot of people said, we've seen this before, we've been there already. I mean, video conferencing is a prime example that we'd bought a video conferencing unit a number of years ago. And unfortunately, video conferencing were always seen as a destination activity. You went to the video conferencing unit to video conference.
Which is bizarre when you think about it.
Yeah, to talk to someone else who'd gone to their video conference unit to talk through, and it never worked, and IT had to get involved, etc., etc. So we had to tell people, well, no, your video conference unit's your laptop or it's your webcam, etc. We also then had people who had been clamouring for this for a while. The people who had been using social media, Messenger, etc., as this instantaneous communication mechanism. I think the way we adopted it is that we had some certain sponsors. So certain our senior officers were then using the technology, and other people then looking over the shoulder and saying, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? How are you doing that? oh, can I have it? And then that IT then got questioned. Why can't we have this? So then we brought them online. Other people said, well, I'll never touch that. I'll never need it. And ultimately, you've ended up being almost not disenfranchising those individuals, but you've found that the people who were reluctant to use it initially now see the benefits of doing it. Because one of the things that we looked at as part of this flexible working is that we would try and put everything in a browser. So they've got SharePoint in a browser, they've got Office in a browser now, we've got the link technology in a browser, we've got video conferencing in a browser. So their desktop is wherever they are. Whereas before, we had, you're on a video conference, right, you need to book the conference room, you need to book the video conferencing unit, you need to get a telephone number off somebody, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Whereas now, if you want to contact somebody, you see that list down the side, just click on the face.
They're the people you can contact.
And you can see their status.
Did you have a generation gap on this? Just a quick one. Old people didn't want to do it.
Can't say old people. We had the
older people.
Yeah, the time-served firefighters. I mean, historically, the firefighters, as I alluded before, had joined the fire service to save people from burning buildings, and obviously they didn't want to use technology. I think now they're able to do things like book their leave from home, contact their manager, and various other things. It's now, I want to say, empowered them, and potentially, as Steve alluded, it's this work-life balance thing. If we can say to somebody, you don't need to travel into the office now to start your working day, you can start from your kitchen, or you can start from the nearest internet cafe, or you can start from one of our sites. I mean, these are for the back office systems. Obviously, firefighters are not going to take the fire engine over them and
Can I just put my hands over here a minute, please? Yeah.
But it's for the back office system. I think people are now realising that there's now a benefit to them. And I think as an organisation, we're now seeing that people, I won't say are working longer, but they're working either earlier or later. So that, and again, we need to be looking at outcomes, not necessarily clock card times, because again, we've always done that. You've looked at your timesheet and said, well, you've been in, you've worked 37 hours. No, actually, you've been sat in the office 37 hours. I don't know you've been working for 37 hours.
Or you've been driving to a meeting for...
Yeah, and I think the other challenge we've had from people is, especially with the presence thing, people have said, my manager can now see what I'm doing. We can see I'm working or possibly not working. And we said, well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I think that it's overcoming that. I also turn it round to them and say, well, you actually can see now whether your manager's working or not working. And again, that's been a bit of an empowerer.
Dale, how do you keep momentum going on these things?
I think it's a case of working these mechanisms into just the way you go about doing things on a daily basis. And I think momentum, the feedback we get from Reg readers and through other research is that momentum actually is reasonably well maintained once you've got past that initial adoption curve. So it's not like spinning plates where you have to keep going back and,
keep going back and jiggle them.
Exactly. Once you actually get it going, it's a bit like maybe snowball's a bit sort of overstating it, but it will just keep rolling, and people will naturally find new ways of doing it. So actually you find that once you get past that initial phase, usage tends to broaden. I'd be interested in whether you've seen that in your organisation.
I think the other thing about single vendor or multiple vendor, the first thing people say is, what's in it for me? Why have I got something else to learn? And back to the thing you originally said, that the individual parts, the sum of the whole is much greater than the individual elements. Once you've learnt one bit of the technology, the next bit is just a tiny incremental leap. So to move from presence information to an email to a telephone call is just clicking through tabs. And people incrementally pick that up. Whereas what we've done historically is say, right, OK, you've now emailed that person, they're not there, you now need to log onto this other system and do that. And obviously the thing I did say before is, as we have different update cycles for software, you're then teaching people different softwares at different times. So today the screen's changed, and we were constantly, and to use the pun, firefighting, trying to keep these technologies together. Whereas the individuals have now, I think we had to drag some people to it, and we're now beating people off with sticks in terms of wanting to be on the system. It's a bit like Twitter and Facebook and all that. A few people used it, and then the other people thought they were sidelined because they weren't on it, and we're now getting that emphasis. Right. And we've had management say, why do firefighters need to be sending instant messages and things? Well, they do because they want an answer. They're not saying it because they're trying to arrange football tournaments. And there may be, but the evidence that we've got is not. And I think the other challenge we've got, definitely on saving money, I think we're talking with Steve before the meeting, is mobile phones are fantastic at generating revenue for telephone providers, because effectively I'd ring Steve and say, hi Steve, are you all right? We'd then talk about the weather, we'd talk about the rugby, we'd talk about what we did at the weekend. I've now spent 10 minutes, and all I wanted to know is a quick answer. Whereas an instant message, depending on how quick you type, you'll just be quite brief and say, where's this 5 million from? And then you'll get an instant answer back. And if people want to keep talking about the weather, you can just switch them off. And it's zero cost, effectively.
Yeah, there's a kind of etiquette that needs to be built up around the use of these things, isn't there? But picking up on the cultural thing, I don't think you should underestimate the importance of understanding the culture that you're starting from, because if you're introducing this kind of stuff into an organisation like Darren's, then you know what you're dealing with. You've got a well-defined starting point. You know you've got to move people along in a particular way. Sometimes if you're actually in a very sort of whiz-bang high, a youngish professional services type environment, actually weaning these guys off Facebook and Twitter and everything else onto the corporate system can be more of a problem than in Darren's kind of environment, getting people who are a little bit conservative into it in the first place.
The great thing about these systems is that they work pretty well for what they do, and some things in the corporate environment they're not really well suited to. Steve, it's a bit of a, it's a challenge. It's a problem for Microsoft doing it, to create something like, live meeting for an example, that people will think, that's really useful. I can see how I would use that. I would prefer to use that rather than being forced to use that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there is this kind of, if you invest 10 minutes to understand what the technology can do for you, and then realise that it can save you that journey through rush hour, or the fact that you can only manage 4 or 5 meetings a day, not the 8 that you really need to be able to do to get your day finished by 5:30. That epiphany moment, that first time you use it, is when people realise, actually, there is another way I can work here, and if it doesn't mean I can work from home or from the nearest wireless hotspot and conduct my meetings online, well, then that's just saved me a whole heap of time.
Yeah. Anything surprising requests popped up, Darren, from this? Anything unexpected?
Well, numerous requests. People working from home, I think, is the classic one
that
you get from people that historically have never been able to work from home, or without massive investments from IT in terms of hand-holding and SSL VPN links and dongles and various things else.
Yes.
So I think
that's really what they want. And have you? Were you set up at the beginning? Were you ready for that tidal wave of complaints?
No. I think again. I think
confident.
I think the challenge we had is that, as Steve said, I had the vision that this would work, or we were brainwashed to say that it would work, and then just dragging people along with that. And I say, as soon as people see it, it's convincing the doubters and trying to keep up with the early adopters and not want to stifle them. Because what we want to do is roll it out a little bit at a time. And as with all technologies, people want to, I've clicked on this thing, what does that do? And I think the challenge we had in terms of IT is we've got our day-to-day job to do normally, and we were introducing new technology, and it's supporting that. So our users downloaded the advanced manual for it and has started doing X, Y, and Z, and it's how we support that.
I don't know if this applies in your environment, but some of the feedback we've had from people who've rolled this kind of stuff out is, if you go into a lot of departments or even rooms in buildings, you'll find quite often there's the go-to guy. If you're developing an Excel macro, he's the guy that you go and say, can you help me with this, Trevor, or whatever. And you find that those kind of guys naturally sort of pick up and assume an unofficial support role. Did that?
Well, we have that. We have on every, obviously the fire service is 24/7, so you have watchers, and the groups of 8 or 10 people who works on a particular watch, and you will have the person either is the go-to guy or is the lumbered with the IT guy.
The lumbered with guy. It's a positive way of saying.
You've got 10 minutes. You're interested in PCs, and therefore you can do it. And I think what we've tried to do is provide that support mechanism, as I said before, that we've tried to provide stuff online. So through SharePoint, we put as many manuals as we can put on. People never read it because effectively it's easier just to instant message somebody, or it is to pick up a phone than actually go and click and read a manual. The problem is there's nobody at the end of the phone during the weekend. So people are now getting to this mentality of doing that. Or by having the mentor scheme, they know someone who knows someone who can do it. And I think that's been beneficial to us. But to be honest, and I'm not saying this because Microsoft are here, but the technology is relatively intuitive. Once you've seen someone do it, it's not that difficult to do it. I mean, we've had weird things where people have actually instant messaged everybody in the organisation wrongly. You only ever do it once, but that's the price you've got to pay.
The instant message, doesn't it?
Instant message.
Yeah.
But it's that price you pay in terms of implementing technology. You have to put boundaries in there, and how you manage that process.
Well, it's a couple of the questions here. The SIP protocol was meant to be dealing with all these integration problems, wasn't it? But instead, you've gone via the sort of one vendor solution because it sort of worked quite well. Dale, can you give us a bit of an insight from your point of view? How important is SIP in all of this?
Well, I think SIP and standards in general are important, but also it's not just about the raw standards. It's also about making sure that if you are using multiple vendors, that those vendors have some kind of relationship between them. Because the problem is, as soon as you join everything up, when you're trying to troubleshoot across different domains, you find that you are crossing boundaries. So if you are going to go with 2 vendors, yes, of course, the standards make sure that you can plug and play, and particularly with things like handsets and equipment that you just want to sort of use with the installation, that's really useful. But when you think of it from a support perspective, and in terms of sort of moving forward with incremental functionality and stuff, having vendors who actually have a relationship is quite important. So I would always check that, these guys aren't arch enemies and at each other's throats.
There won't be bug passing going on.
Integration's key for us as well, because invariably if Link isn't performing the telephony piece but something else like a virus Cisco system is, the thing that gets blamed when it doesn't work is the end user application, it's Link, which it may be or it may not be, but invariably it's what people can see that gets blamed, not the back-end infrastructure. So it's absolutely key that the integration's there, as Dale says.
Yeah, and does that integration have to be, is that a question of selecting the right partner, the right reseller to work with?
It's on 2 levels, really. One is at the manufacturer's level, so we have to make sure that we're all talking to each other, and when we brought out Link, we had all the key telephony vendors that were part of the early adoption of Link, and they were testing against their PBX systems against Link, so that when we launched it, we already knew that it worked against their telephony platforms. But then on a partner level as well, you need a partner that knows what they're doing in terms of physically integrating the stuff on site.
Yeah. Darren, a little bit about how the change in the mix of communication has happened. Is there an easy way you can summarise this? Because someone's saying, what's the alternative to meetings? What are you using? Are you using your conference calls? Are you using live meeting, for example?
A mixture, really. I mean, the fact that we, at our headquarters site, we've had people... today is a management board meeting, and effectively we've got 2 people one has hurt his leg, so he can't drive in, so he's actually live meeting from home, and secondly is on another site who's actually got a meeting sort of an hour after the meeting starts. So I think chipping away at it. So like the live meeting thing is taken up, but even just people, the whiteboarding side of it. I mean, the other thing that is that and potentially getting slightly off topic here. Is the thing that we found from IT is getting third-party support from people. So effectively we had issues with our Exchange sort of solution, and we want to contact the vendor. Historically, we would have had them dial in an SSL VPN, sniff around the system, etc. Effectively what I did, I just opened up my desktop, created a Link meeting session, shared my desktop, and then we worked through the process together. And it were 2 clicks. It wasn't all right, I need to send this dongle, I need you to sign this confidentiality agreement, I need to do X, Y, and Z, and we resolve the problem straight away. And we find, I guess, that more and more that people are now using it on the help desk as being the help desk functionality.
Do you tell people what to do, how to communicate? For example, do you say, in this circumstance, you can't have a meeting, you have to do it via the technology? Or do you let them find their own way?
I think people find their own way, and I think, as Steve said, you will find that people say, well, why ain't Bob attending this meeting? Oh, he is. He's on his laptop and he's moving into it. And then people think, well, why can't I do it? Why? I've just driven 45 minutes. I've just got stressed. I need to be on at 3 o'clock, and that sort of attitude. And I think we're going to just chip away at it bit by bit. I think we're never going to get away from meetings, and I think there's sometimes that see the whites of the eye sort of type thing, or the in the corridor sort of after the meeting.
For example, we dragged you down to the studio here, so we could check you were telling the truth.
And I could sort of do that thing. And I think we'll never get away from that face-to-face meeting, but I think most of the meetings that happen in it's necessarily in our organisation, our discussing a topic, and that topic is often paper-based, but why can't it be based on a spreadsheet, or why don't you whiteboard it out, etc. And the other thing that we're just hopefully going to do at the end of next month is we've got a lecture theatre, which we bring people in. We'll bring about 68 officers in, discuss a new topic or do something. We're now looking at recording those and making them now widely available to people, because again,
other people can take part in that, even if
they're
they're
not.
not.
But also, it's this openness. It's a learning thing. So when we do debriefs after incidents, we're now looking at recording those as well and making those available through live meeting. So it's not wasted time. It's not wasted opportunity. So because we only can fit 68 people in the room, you might want 80 people to see that, or it might be part of their plan. And it's best to get from the horse's mouth than me go back to a meeting and only tell them the salient parts that are doing it, or the parts that I were aware of when I wasn't on my BlackBerry answering other messages.
Okay, then very quick, because we're right near the end. I want all three of you to look at if there was a sort of like a quick win on this, if people wanted to get started and get some way down the line, then very briefly, what would that be? Steve, you're nodding, so you've got one in your mind, obviously.
I think, as Darren's alluded to, first thing is get your messaging infrastructure up to speed. Software-powered voice is a big jump for a lot of people, so moving to Exchange 2010, looking at replacing old voicemail systems is a good place to start. Gets people used to the idea of
the voicemail
software.
On the,
exactly,
and the email integrated. Dale, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd agree. Get voice, instant messaging in the same environment as email as quickly as possible. And if you can stick presence in there at the same time, then without worrying about video and lots of other fancy stuff that you can get into, just those components themselves will take you forward.
Very quick extra question. Should we be moving all this to the cloud, go straight to the cloud when you do this? Or is that too much of a risk?
It's not a risk for smaller businesses. In fact, for smaller businesses who would maybe find it harder to manage this kind of stuff in-house, it's by far the most sensible thing to do. I mean, this is one of those areas, as you know, Tim, I'm not massively in favour of putting everything into the cloud.
You're a cloud skeptic.
This is one of those things, though, that it does make sense. It's very communication-centric. It's incremental stuff that you don't have on-premise at the moment. So.
And Darren, last word to you. If there's a quick win that you could say to other people, this'll help you along the way, what would it be?
Presence for us. The ability to see where people are and what they're doing, all their availability, and be able to make a decision instantly, or find another person who could help you make that decision.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. Steve, Darren, Dale, thank you for coming in. Thanks for your questions. Hope you liked it. Let us know. We'll see you soon for another Regcast. I've been Tim Phillips. Goodbye.